In today's breakdown video, we're going to be explaining the reasons why Rizvan Kuniev and Vinicius Oliveira are very good bets this weekend. And I'm sorry this video is coming out a little bit later than I would have liked. You can blame Keir Starmer and the bastards in the British government for that, because last week in the UK was basically tax filing week. So it was a crazy week for me, which meant I had to start researching these fights a little bit later than I would have liked. And so that just pushed back the time where I could get this video out to you guys. But don't worry, everything will be back to normal for the next event, where you'll be getting these breakdowns nice and early. And of course, we had another profitable week last week. We've been doing well recently. Hopefully you've been gaining a lot of value, making some good cash from these breakdowns. We put out, or we recommended 3 bets on YouTube last week. Diego Lopez, which was a loser. Tai Tuivasa, which was a loser, but he did come pretty close, to be fair. Shame his takedown offense is an absolute disaster, but in the third round he had Taliesin in a little bit of trouble. Mikhailov, obviously, bet in the even money odds range, won, which was very nice. And then these bets on Offley and Nakamura. So 3 and 2 overall on bets that we put out on YouTube last week. 4 of them were underdogs: Lopez, Tuivasa, Nakamura, and Offley. So if you would have bet level stakes 1 unit on each of the 5 bets put out on YouTube last week, you would have made a nice solid overall profit, with 2 of those winners being at underdog odds and the third winner, Mikhailov, being in the even money odds range. I will say this, still think Tuivasa was a very, very good bet in the odds range that we bet him at. His takedown offense is a disaster. We knew that going in. There was no surprises there. And he did come close to getting Taliesin out of there in the third round when Taliesin was exhausted. It's a shame his takedown offense was as bad as it was, because if it was just a little bit better, I think he actually would have got his hand raised. And also, I do think there were a lot of lazy scorecards thrown out for the Diego Lopez versus Alexander Volkanovski fight. I saw MMA Guru say the same thing, and he took a lot of heat for this, where he said it was actually a super close fight. I very, very much agree with MMA Guru. I think all these 50-45 Volk, 49-46 Volk scorecards are quite frankly absurd. And I think if that fight was taking place on neutral territory anywhere else in the world, I think that would very likely have gone to a split decision, or scorecards would have been all over the place. The reason why I say that is the first round was basically a 50-50 round. Total coin flip, very, very close. The second round, in my opinion, was a clear round for Diego Lopez, because for the first 4 minutes of the round, it was kind of close. It was even. The striking was back and forth. Volk was just edging it by a little bit, but then Diego Lopez ended round 2 with a back take, finished strong. And in my opinion, in an otherwise close round, that was more than enough to steal the second. Then in the third round, Diego Lopez got the knockdown towards the end of the round. Volk took a knee when Lopez dropped him. And again, outside of that, the striking in that third round was kind of close. So the knockdown should have been enough to steal round 3 for Lopez. Then obviously Volk won rounds 4 and 5 pretty clear. So all these 50-45, 49-46 scorecards, I just feel is very lazy judging, very lazy scoring of a fight. And I often wonder how much a lot of the people tossing scores out on fights as close as that, how much they were actually paying attention, or if they were busy playing Candy Crush on their phone, because that was a very, very, very close fight. So I think we did good last week. 5 bets. Offley, Nakamura, Mikhailov come through for us. Tuivasa and Lopez came close to coming through for us, particularly Tuivasa. It wasn't to be, but that's the way it goes. You can't win them all. Hopefully we can bank another profitable week this week, and hopefully you get a lot of value out of these videos. I tell you what, you will get a lot of value out of my live betting group. I hate to say it, but so many of you watching this video do not understand what an incredible opportunity you have in front of you when I tell you, join my live betting group. It will pay for itself, and you will make a profit almost every month of the year. Over the last 10 years, we've been profitable in 73% of months, which is absurd in the world of sports betting. And we make a profit on 68% of events. So it's an absolute no-brainer to join my live betting group. Yet so many of you watching this haven't joined. It makes no sense to me. If you get value out of these videos, I'm telling you, live betting is my bread and butter. I'm the best in the world at it, and if you think my analysis on these videos is good, wait till you hear what I do in live betting. So go ahead, give it a try. Link in the description below. You will not be disappointed. We are going to kick this week's breakdowns off by taking a deep dive into the matchup between Dustin Jacabe and Julius Walker, which is a very good fight. We'll kick things off by taking a look at the odds. Jacabe is a 1.54 favourite, which is minus 186 for an implied probability of 65%. Walker, 2.49 underdog, which is plus 149 for an implied probability of 40%. The fighter comparison tool shows us that Jacabe is 11 years older than Walker. We know the younger fighter wins around 70% of the time 7-0 when there's an 11-year age gap in a fight, which gives a huge statistical advantage to Walker, which is very interesting because he's the underdog that only has an implied probability of 40%. So if you were to blindly bet on those age stats over the long term, that would be a crazy 30% margin over that age stat. So Walker, is he someone you want to consider betting this weekend? We'll get into it shortly, but it's not very often that 37-year-olds beat 26-year-olds. So from that perspective, this is an interesting fight. We can also see that Walker is a little bit longer, a little bit taller than Jacabe, nothing major. Now, if we take a look at the stats, these stats aren't super valuable for Julius Walker because he's only had 2 fights in the UFC. So it's not like we've got tons of fights to generate really good quality data from, but we can take a quick look, see what it's saying. We can see Jacabe lands 24% more strikes per minute. We can see that Mr. Walker is a little bit more accurate. Jacabe, though, better defensively, but the real tale of this fight is the ground game and the classic striker versus grappler dynamic, with Jacabe being the striker, Walker being the grappler, and we can see Walker very aggressive with the takedown attempts, averaging 3.7 or 3.17 more takedowns per fight than Jacabe. Jacabe, pure striker, never tries to take his opponents down. Jacabe's takedown offense, though, the number's not great. 62% takedown offense isn't great, but what I can tell you about Jacabe is that when he does get taken down, he's pretty good at working his way back up to his feet. In terms of the strike distribution chart, both guys mix it up quite a bit, actually, with Walker throwing a lot of body shots, although I think these stats weigh a lot of strikes land into the body for Walker because so much time in his first 2 fights in the UFC against Rafael Sequeira and Alonzo Menefield have been spent either on the ground or in the clinch, where he's been landing like short shots to the body. So I don't think he lands 27% of his distance strikes standing up at range of the body. I think those are shots in the clinch and like I say, on the ground. So classic striker versus grappler matchup, and this is a difficult fight to feel super confident in because we haven't seen a whole lot of Walker, because his first 2 fights in the UFC have consisted of, like I say, being on the ground or in the clinch, and we know Jacabe has a good enough ability to work his way back up to his feet when taken down to keep this fight standing, and we haven't really seen Walker in a pure stand-up fight. If you take a look at the numbers, he spammed 9 takedowns against Menefield, which is a lot. So 9 takedown attempts. He was only successful with 1 of them, but he did come into that fight on less than a week's notice. He was more successful in his last fight against Sequeira, securing 6 out of the 10 attempted takedowns. But of course, Sequeira is far easier to take down than Menefield. But what these numbers do show us is that Walker is very persistent with his grappling, and he will shoot a very, very high volume of takedowns. 9-10 takedown attempts per fight. That is a lot. And what these numbers also show us is that he's not one of these grapplers that if you stuff, his first few takedown attempts, he's going to kind of stop shooting and, be reluctant to try and get the fight to the ground. This is a guy that will persistently try to grapple no matter how good of a job you do shutting his offensive wrestling down. So Julius Walker will no doubt come into this fight with a grappling heavy game plan if his last 2 matchups are anything to go by. And so this breakdown really focuses on what Jacabe's chances are of keeping the fight standing, and if the fight does stay standing, how that matchup then looks. So Jacabe is obviously pretty old now for a light heavyweight, 37 years old. He's had over 30 pro fights. He's got a lot of miles on the clock, and we are definitely seeing decline in Dustin Jacabe. He's one of those guys that was super durable, super tough when he first came into the UFC. But if you go back and watch his last sort of 3 or 4 fights, he's been rocked, wobbled, and dropped in almost all of them at some point. And some of the fights, you know, like with Vito Petrino, he's been able to tough it out, come back and win, but not so much in the Dominic Reyes and Alonzo Menafield fights. And he was also dropped a couple of times against Azamat Mirzakhanov as well. So Jacabe's gone from being extremely durable and having a granite chin to not really being able to take a shot like he used to be able to. The question is whether Julius Walker will be able to make him pay for that. Now, based on past performances, Walker doesn't look like a particularly heavy hitter. He's more of a volume striker, but at 37 years old, with this much miles on the clock, it's probably not going to take much to get Jacabe out of there on the feet. So to summarise everything that I've just said, the way I would look at this fight from a betting point of view is, whilst Jacabe's takedown offence isn't great, he is very difficult to hold down, and his cardio is great. Even at this stage in his career at 37 years old, his cardio is very good. And Walker is a guy that has slowed down in his last 2 fights. We can somewhat let him off the hook for the Alonzo Menafield matchup because he took it on short notice, but he also slowed down in his last matchup, which is far more concerning because he was in total control. He did spend a lot of time on top of Sakura, and if you go and watch the 3rd round of that fight, he just looked very, very tired. That's a bit of a red flag to me. We know Jacabe is more than likely going to have the cardio edge here, even at 37 years old. And it's possible Walker may tire himself out trying to get Jacabe to the ground and keep him on the ground. So I do really like Dustin Jacabe in this fight. I think that even if he gets taken down, he's got the skills to work his way back up to his feet and therefore keep the majority of this fight standing. And I think if he keeps this fight standing, he will likely outstrike Julius Walker. Now, this is one of those matchups, and there are a lot of fights on the card like this. If you're watching this video on YouTube, you know, obviously I'm not going to be uploading all my breakdown videos for the prelims this week because I haven't got time. But if you want to come over to my website, link in the description below, you can watch my breakdown videos for every single fight on this card. And you'll know a recurring theme on this card is that there are a lot of fighters that I heavily favour and I want to bet, but the odds are just kind of where they should be, and I don't have the margin of value I need in order to take on the risk. And Jacabe's a really good example of this because whilst I heavily favour him, his odds carry an implied probability of 65%, which means in order to get any betting value on Jacabe, in order to take a bet on him, you've got to give him a 70% or better chance of winning, which is extremely difficult to do at his age when we know he is getting rocked, wobbled and dropped a lot. And even though Walker's not a particularly dangerous striker, it only takes 1 punch, and Jacabe could be in a lot of trouble. On top of that, Jacabe, his takedown offense isn't the best, and as you get older, your balance starts to grow. And so even though Jacabe's been difficult to hold down in the past, who knows if he's going to be difficult to hold down in 2026, as his body and athletic performance is naturally going to be declining. So if this was Jacabe in his prime, I'd absolutely bet him at an implied probability of 64%, 1.54 minus 186 odds. But at 37 years old, it is a hard, tough, reluctant pass for me because I think he is very likely to win. And I'd be very surprised if Walker were to pull it out the bag this weekend. So anyway, let me know in the chat room or in the comments below if you're going to be betting this fight, who you favour. Heavily favour Jacabe, but his odds I think are probably exactly where they should be. No value here. The betting market has done its job on this fight. Odds are spot on. Now, out of all the fights on this week's card, the matchup that I've been asked for my opinion on the most in the chat room is this one between Farid Basharat and Gene Matsumoto, because the odds are very wide here. We can see Basharat is a big favourite at average odds of around 1.34 minus 292 for an implied probability of 75%. And Matsumoto is a 3.28 underdog, which is plus 228 for an implied probability of 31%. And you guys know me. I love betting underdogs. We bet 4 underdogs last week with Diego Lopez, Taito Ivasa, Nakamura and Khan Offley. We're betting 2 underdogs this week with Vinicius Oliveira and Kuniev. So is Matsumoto someone that we should take a shot on this weekend in a fight where the odds are very wide? And there's no doubt Gene Matsumoto is very good. He's very well rounded. He's very young, so he's going to be making big improvements from fight to fight. I think possibly the reason why so many of you have asked me for my opinion on this matchup in the chat room is because Matsumoto is usually the type of guy I would take a shot on. So we're going to take a deep dive into this fight. We're going to show you some footage from some of Matsumoto's past performances, maybe a little bit of footage from Basharat's past performances, and then you can see for yourselves how I feel about this fight based on the facts, the evidence, the footage that I show you, because as you guys know, the only place you find truth and honesty in this game is in the fight footage. It doesn't lie. It is what it is. So we'll kick things off with the fighter comparison tool. Don't forget, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can gain access to this fighter comparison tool. Link in the description below. Join my community and you just go to tools and there it is. It's the UFC research tool, and you can unlock all these features and use it for your own research, which will save you tons of time and a giant pain in the ass, because as you can see, if we look at the fighter records, there's links to all the past matchups here which you can take a look at to quickly go and watch past fights, and we'll be using that tool shortly, show you a little bit of footage on Mr. Matsumoto. So, fighter comparison tool, both guys about the same age. We can see that Basharat, a little bit longer, a little bit taller. No individually massive size advantage there for Basharat, but you do have the compounding effect of him being a bit taller, having a slightly longer reach and also a slightly longer leg reach. If we take a look at the stats though, we can see Matsumoto lands 18% more strikes per minute. We can see Basharat is more accurate with his strikes though. Matsumoto does get a bit sloppy. We might show you a bit of footage of that in a bit. We can see Basharat is also better defensively, marginally better defensively. Now, when it comes to the grappling stats, these stats did surprise me a little bit, because I didn't think, watching Matsumoto's past fights, that he was as active with the takedowns as these stats suggest. We can see Basharat definitely shoots more takedowns per fight, but Matsumoto's not too far behind him, 2.73 versus 3.97 on average per 15 minutes. The real difference between these two, Basharat's takedown offense is far better at 80%, 58% takedown offense is very poor, and I'm going to be showing you some footage of Matsumoto's takedown offense in a moment so you can kind of see just how much of a problem this particular stat is. In terms of submission attempts, neither of them are that aggressive at pursuing the submission on the ground. They both tend to favour the control and kind of damage with ground and pound. Now, the strike distribution chart shows that both of them throw an above average amount of body and leg strikes, but for the most part, the vast majority of their strikes are targeted to the head. Now, when we try to assess who is more likely to win a fight like this, the answer is not very relevant to how we view this fight from a betting point of view. Because last week, if you would have asked me who's more likely to win between Tai Tuivasa and Thaleson Teixeira, I would have said Thaleson Teixeira. But that didn't mean he was the better bet out of the two. And we do have exactly the same situation here, where even though I do think Basharat is more likely to win this fight, at an implied probability of 75%, it's impossible to bet on him. So it doesn't matter if you're Basharat's brother, who's also fighting on his card, or his mum, or his dad, or his pet cat. Doesn't matter how much you love Basharat, it is impossible to bet him in this odds range. Because in order to get any value, you've got to give him a better than 80% chance of winning, which is simply, if you have a brain and you have eyes, it's impossible. So what we're focusing on in this breakdown is whether Matsumoto is worth a bet or not, because at an implied probability of 31%, that's more of a debate, that's more of a discussion, that's something that we can maybe consider, right? Because in order to get any margin of value over Matsumoto's odds, you've only got to give him like a 35% chance of winning, which is far more achievable, especially because we know both these guys are very good, they're both skilled. Matsumoto is very well rounded. So how do these two match up from a striking point of view? What I would say is that Matsumoto has the advantage when it comes to striking in the first half of the fight. I think Basharat's better defensively. I think he uses his length reasonably well. Basharat's issue is that he doesn't really hurt you on the feet, so he's more of a volume striker. Now, Matsumoto's not crazy dangerous on the feet either, but he does fight to hurt you. He's aggressive. He's got a bit more pop in his shots, does a bit more damage than Basharat. I'm not necessarily going to say Matsumoto is a more technical striker than Basharat, but I think in a sport where we're supposed to score things on damage, Matsumoto is going to be better equipped at doing damage with his strikes early. And I think there's not going to be a massive difference in terms of volume. If we look at the fighter comparison tool again, you can see that Matsumoto lands 18% more strikes per minute than Basharat. But I think Basharat is better at using his length and better defensively than some of the past opponents Matsumoto's fought. So I don't see that 18% of being a particularly big deal. I think Basharat will be harder to get to for Matsumoto than someone like Miles Johns as an example. And so, on the feet, I think this will be very close. Because if it goes to a decision, I see Matsumoto doing well in the first half of the fight. I see Basharat doing better on the feet in the second half of the fight. And the reason why I say that is because Matsumoto, he doesn't have bad cardio, but because he's so aggressive, he burns through a lot of energy. And he just naturally slows down as fights wear on and becomes sloppier. So I think Matsumoto will do really well first half of the fight. Basharat really well in the second half of the fight. And I think who's going to win this matchup is likely going to be determined by how much energy Matsumoto exerts early. And Basharat's grappling can have a big impact on that, which we'll go into in a moment. And so the way I see this fight going down is Matsumoto probably will win the first round and Basharat will probably win the third round. And there's going to be that swing moment in round 2 where whoever nicks round 2, whether Matsumoto's got the energy to do it or whether Basharat swings momentum in his favour in round 2 and he can nick backdoor round 2, that round 2 is going to be the swing. And this is one of those fights where our edge live betting the sport is absolutely massive. Right? If you're not in my live betting group, you need to ask yourself why. Because we make a profit almost every week, 68% of events. And it's events like this, these low-key fight night cards that no one's paying attention to. And fights like this, where we absolutely crush it. Our win rate on events like this is absurd. So if you're not in the live betting group, you should be. Because it pays for itself and you'll absolutely love it. And so, with a matchup like this, it's that second round, that swing round, which makes it very difficult to predict before the fight takes place, before a punch is thrown, who's going to win. And so we've spoken about grappling, we've spoken about both guys' approach to the fight, we've spoken about cardio and pacing, but I really feel a big determining factor in who wins this is going to be how they match up when it comes to grappling. Because Matsumoto's takedown offense is just bad. There's no way to really dress it up. And for me, if you ask me to justify why these odds are so wide, what is the one reason why Basharat is a big favourite in this, I would tell you it's because Matsumoto's takedown offense is a bit tragic. And the problem with Matsumoto's takedown defense is that he's not bad at working his way back up to his feet, but he does give up cheap takedowns all the time, which means it's really hard for him to build momentum in fights, because when he's facing a skilled grappler, as soon as he starts to pull away from his opponent, rack up a bit of volume, put some volume together, he's just going to get taken down. And that makes it very difficult to trust him with your money. Now, if we look at Basharat's past fights, you can see that he can be quite aggressive with the takedowns. So if we go all the way back to his Contender Series fight, he shot 4 takedowns on the Contender Series. He shot 6 against Blackshear, 5 against Rodriguez, 16 against Taylor Lapillus, 7 against Hugo, and then 2 against Gutierrez. And look, his actual takedown attempt success rate's not great, right? 3 of 6, 2 of 5, 5 of 16. It's not great. But what this does show is that Basharat will actively try to get fights to the ground. And that's a real problem for someone like Matsumoto, because if we look at the Miles Johns fight as an example, Johns shot 8 takedowns on Matsumoto and only defended 3 of them. And so if Basharat is the kind of guy that'll come in and shoot 16 takedowns on Matsumoto, Matsumoto is going to spend so much time trying to defend takedowns, trying to work his way back up to his feet, that he's not going to have a bunch of time on the feet to use that slight edge that he has striking. And on top of that, remember what I said earlier on in the breakdown, Matsumoto does naturally slow down just because of how aggressive he is. And the fastest way to make someone like Matsumoto slow down is by taking him down, forcing him to defend takedowns, forcing him to exert energy to work his way back up to his feet. So this fighter comparison tool, this UFC research tool, it's fantastic, and I hope you're all getting a lot of value out of using it, because without us having to, drill down and write down exact numbers from fights we watch, we can just get a quick overview of how active and aggressive Basharat is with his takedowns. And this gives us a really good overall picture statistically of how the two of them match up. And then when we watch the footage, when we watch the past fights, that just reaffirms what the numbers show us. But this research tool is so useful. I hope you're using it. I hope you like it. And if you are using it, if you do like it, please leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube and let me know if there's anything you'd like me to do to it to improve it or make it better. But it's absolutely brilliant for finding little nuances like that, because I know so many people coming into this fight this weekend will be focused on what Matsumoto can do on the feet and how he can cause Basharat problems when it comes to striking. But are they really looking at how this fight is likely to go if Basharat comes in with a grappling heavy game plan like he has done so many times in the past? So what we're now going to do is use the research tool to bring up some past fights. And we're going to start off with, in fact, we're just going to watch the Miles Johns fight. So the Miles John fight will be a good one because it's Matsumoto's last fight. And so he's going to give us the most accurate representation of where his takedown offense is going to be in 2026, because we know ultimately with how young Matsumoto is, he's going to be making big improvements from fight to fight. And I hate how they always autoplay the audio on that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to scrub through this footage and we're just going to focus on how Matsumoto deals with grappling positions. So here we go. So Miles Johns shoots the first takedown here just over a minute into round one, and you can see Matsumoto gives it up quite easily. Now remember what we said earlier in the breakdown, Matsumoto isn't the easiest to hold down, and you can see it's kind of a combination of him scooting his butt over to the cage and Miles Johns picking him up and carrying him over to the cage. But you can see shortly Matsumoto will start to work up to his feet. So you can see he's trying to clear his legs out from underneath Miles Johns here. And at this point, he's been on the ground for about 30 seconds, coming up to 30 seconds. So we'll just skip ahead a little bit so we don't make the breakdown super long. So he's been on the ground for about a minute at this point. We'll keep going. And then after he's been on the ground for about a minute, he decides to make a move to stand back up. And when he commits to standing back up, he does a pretty good job of it. So we'll skip through. That's pretty much the end of the round. Couple more takedown attempts from Johns, gets stuffed, but nothing major. We now go into round two. So we want to pay attention to his takedown offense here. So there's a nice deep entry there from Johns, but Matsumoto shows him strong hips, stays square to the takedown attempt, and is able to completely neutralize it, which is very nice. We'll keep skipping, and then the next takedown comes around midway through round two. And you can see he grabs a single leg and just dumps Matsumoto down. So you can see again, Matsumoto does go down quite easily and attacks with the guillotine, uses the guillotine to get back up. Very, very nice. So like I say, Matsumoto is difficult to hold down, can be aggressive at working his way back up to his feet, but takedown offense not the best. We'll see another takedown attempt come in here in a moment. That time, Matsumoto does a good job of getting his back up against the cage, creating a wide base and stuffing the takedown. So if we go into round three, I want to show you a bit more of round three, because remember I said that Matsumoto gets a bit sloppier as fights wear on. I just want to take it from like a minute and a half into round three so you can kind of see that sloppiness. So remember, one of the stats the fighter comparison tool showed us was that Basharat is much better when it comes to striking defense. And you'll really see that in the third round, where Matsumoto's striking defense is far better in the first half of fights than it is in the second. Now, what you'll see from him in this third is a willingness to exchange and a bit of a sloppiness. So this exchange here is a really good example. If you go and watch Matsumoto from the first half of this fight, he's kind of light on his feet. He's in and out. He moves well. He's good at defending himself. Whereas in the second half of fights, he just becomes a bit sloppier. Doesn't really move his head much. Doesn't really back up and try and slip shots. He kind of just hangs in the pocket, looks to exchange. But because of that, he takes a lot of damage and he does eat a lot of strikes, which is problematic against someone like Basharat that does a good job of using his length and does a good job of chipping away at his opponents. You can kind of see it here. Just eats a clean, cold right hand there. Eats another one there. And if we just let this play for like a minute, when they do exchange, you'll see Matsumoto looks very hittable. And this is why I said, you know, I expect Matsumoto to do well in the first half of the fight. But you can see here, he's just very hittable, very vulnerable in these exchanges. I'd expect Matsumoto to do really well in the first half of this fight. But in the second half of the fight, if Basharat's fresher, which if he makes Matsumoto exert a lot of energy in grappling positions, it likely will be, then you could just see Basharat kind of dancing around Matsumoto, using his length to chip away at him. So if we scroll through now, you've seen enough of that point made, I think. And then you can see minute and 20 left to go in round 3. Nice double leg takedown there from Johns. Drives him into the cage, picks him up, takes him down. And you can see for the third time in this fight, Matsumoto gives up a pretty cheap takedown. But for the third time in this fight, Matsumoto doesn't spend too long on the ground before he works his way back up to his feet. So just wanted to show you that so that you can understand how these two match up when it comes to grappling. And so, for me, I understand the reasons why a lot of people are betting Matsumoto this weekend. But for me personally, when I bet underdogs, I want them to either win the fight based on them just being more skilled, or I need the market to have assumed some things about the matchup which may not be true. So I'll give you an example of this, right? If you go and watch my breakdown for the Khan Offley fight last weekend, the reason why I liked Khan Offley as a decent sized underdog is because I felt he might have the advantage when it came to cardio and grappling, right? We didn't know either way based on the past performances, but the betting market in the odds had made an assumption that Yizar had the advantages in those areas because Yizar was a relatively big favourite in that matchup. And I bet Offley as a decent-sized underdog because if you actually did your homework and spent time to watch Yizar's past fights and Offley's past fights, you would have seen that's an assumption, right? The Tai Tuivasa bet, very good example. The market had assumed that Taliesin would be able to out-grapple Tai Tuivasa, that Taliesin would have good cardio for 3 rounds. And I said, look, we've barely seen any of Taliesin's grappling. We've never seen him go past the first round, so his cardio could be absolutely terrible after 1 round. I'm going to take a shot on Tuivasa in this odds range, right? Because there were assumptions that the betting market had made about that fight. For me, there's no assumptions here. Matsumoto's takedown offense is bad, and we know Basharat is a good enough grappler to exploit that. We also know that Matsumoto, his striking's not the best in the second half of fights. We know Basharat's technical has the better cardio out of the two. So for me, this is one of those fights where I look at it and I go, Matsumoto has a big weakness that Basharat's well positioned to exploit. Because if Basharat does shoot 10, 15 takedowns in this fight like we've seen him do in the past, is Matsumoto's striking advantage big enough to negate the time he's going to spend defending takedowns, working his way back up to his feet? And it's a huge problem that his takedown offense is so bad that Basharat can use his wrestling to steal rounds. I just don't think Matsumoto's striking edge is big enough to justify a bet on him here. Because if Basharat fights smart and grapples hard, I think Matsumoto is going to spend most of his time on the ground or in the clinch or being wet blanketed by Basharat. And so for me, it's difficult to bet Matsumoto here. I understand why people are betting him. The odds do feel very wide. But I don't like to bet underdogs when their opponent is well positioned to exploit their biggest weakness. And if you look at all my underdog bets, you'll never find a situation where the footage shows us definitively that the favourite is well positioned to exploit the underdog's big weakness. We acknowledge the underdog may have the big weakness, but betting markets often, they kind of assume the big favourite has got the capability to exploit that. And we make a profit every year betting on the UFC because we identify those situations where that isn't true and those assumptions aren't true. We don't always know they're not true, but we take favourable bets where the value means the risk is, or the reward is worth the risk, and that's why we make a profit every year, and that's why we do really well betting on the sport of the UFC. With this fight, doesn't really fit into that category, so it's a tough one. So I do hope if you're betting this fight this weekend, you found it useful. If you are asking me who the better bet is, I would tell you Matsumoto. But if you're asking me who's more likely to win, I would tell you Basharat. If you're asking me where the value is, I would say the odds are probably where they should be. And so for that reason, I'm going to pass on this one. Now let's get into the fight between Mikhail Oleksiejczuk and Marc-Andre Barrio. And with matchups like this, where the odds are so wide, it's important that our main focus in these breakdowns is the odds, and nothing but the odds. So Oleksiejczuk is a 1.21 favourite, which is minus 486 for an implied probability of 83%. Bario 4.52 underdog, which is plus 352 for an implied probability of 22%. So you already know, if you watch my videos every week, you are smart. You're a very educated bettor of the UFC. You know how this stuff works. Oleksiejczuk is unbettable in this odds range. So this breakdown is going to focus on whether or not Marc-Andre Barrio is worth a bet, because to get any value on Oleksiejczuk at all, you'd have to give him like an 86-87% chance of winning, which in this sport is almost impossible to do, especially when you're a fighter like Oleksiejczuk that does have some weaknesses that Marc-Andre Barrio could potentially exploit, and we'll get into some of those weaknesses in just a little bit. So age, not very relevant with this one. We can see they're both about the same size. Now, in terms of the stats, it was actually interesting to me that Bario lands 14% more strikes per minute, because whenever we think of Oleksiejczuk, we think of him being a very, very aggressive striker. But in this instance, Bario actually lands more strikes per minute. Now, it is worth noting that Oleksiejczuk is a southpaw. He's a very tricky southpaw. Great boxing from the southpaw stance, and that lefty edge will cause Andre Barrio some problems, and it is something that is definitely in favour of Mr. Oleksiejczuk. We can see they're both about the same when it comes to accuracy. Oleksiejczuk is a little bit better defensively. This stat also really surprised me as well, where Oleksiejczuk is more likely to shoot a takedown, because, you know, we'd think of him as a pure striker, Barrio more of the grappler, but that's not what the stats show us. What we can see is Bario is far harder to take down, and Bario also one of these guys that's very difficult to hold down, a little bit like Dustin Jacabe. If you take Marc-Andre Barrio down, he's pretty good at just standing right back up to his feet. This stat is a very concerning one, because 48% takedown offense when you've had as many fights as Oleksiejczuk has in the UFC, especially in a division like the middleweight division where there's not a whole lot of really skilled grapplers. I mean, this stat is an abomination, and it points exactly to where Oleksiejczuk's issues are. Neither guy ever really attempts a submission on the ground, and in terms of the strike distribution chart, for some reason Andre Barrio's stats aren't loading for this. We can see Oleksiejczuk very much the headhunter. So, in terms of how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, despite the stats showing that Marc-Andre Barrio lands more strikes per minute on average, we know Oleksiejczuk has a huge advantage when it comes to striking. He's a very good boxer. I'm not going to say I'm not going to go out there and say Oleksiejczuk has got true legit knockout power. I think with Oleksiejczuk, the shots to knock you out are the ones you don't see coming. And he's so technical, he throws such a diverse range of attacks that I think he just lights people up on the feet and finishes them and gets them out of there just through like overloading them with skill and ability. So Oleg Zajic, much more dangerous on the feet, whereas Marc-Andre Barrio, just a volume striker, doesn't really have the power to hurt anyone on the feet. In fact, if we look at Marc-Andre Barrio's record, his fight record's not loading. Strange. We are lacking a little bit of data for Marc-Andre Barrio. That isn't great. But yeah, he's just a volume striker. So Oleg Zajic, big advantage on the feet. In terms of grappling, Marc-Andre Barrio does have a huge advantage when it comes to grappling. We know Oleg Zajic's takedown offense is bad. He's very weak off his back. But, as you can see from the stats, Marc-Andre Barrio never tries to take his opponents down, so it probably won't matter. If he did get the fight to the ground, he would have a big advantage over Oleg Zajic, but he never shoots takedowns, so it probably won't matter. So this is one of those fights where I heavily favour Oleg Zajic to win. He should win the fight easily because it's likely to be a stand-up fight, and Oleg Zajic is a far better striker. Marc-Andre Barrio also doesn't really have the power in his hands to catch Oleg Zajic with a random shot and knock him out. So if it stays standing, Oleg Zajic will win a very high percentage of the time. But because Oleg Zajic is terrible on the ground, and because his odds carry an implied probability of 83%, and we can't be absolutely certain this fight won't go to the ground, this one's an easy pass. But if you must bet this fight, if you have to bet this fight, if you want to bet this fight, all the value lies with Marc-Andre Barrio. It is Marc-Andre Barrio or pass. It really is as simple as that. Let's move on to the next one. Now I'm going to explain the reason why I think Rizvan Kuniev to beat Jailton Almeida, especially at underdog odds, is a brilliant bet this weekend. And we've hit a lot of winners on underdogs in recent weeks. We had Offley, Nakamura last week at underdog odds. The week before that, we had Justin Gaethje at nice juicy underdog odds. And I'm hoping that we can hit another underdog winner here on Kuniev. Of course, we've got two bets on underdogs this week, Kuniev and Olivivera. So long as just one of them wins, we'll be in profit overall on those two bets. And then we've got potentially a safer bet on one of the favourites on the prelims. We're going to be breaking that fight down on the website. So if you want to watch a breakdown video for all the prelim fights on this card, head on over to my website, link in the description below. But Kuniev at underdog odds, I'm very, very surprised he is the underdog in this one for lots of reasons, which we will get into now. So we're focusing very much on the odds. He's a 2.31 underdog, which is plus 131 for an implied probability of 43%. And Almeida is a 1.62 favourite, which is minus 161 for an implied probability of 62%. So I'm quite surprised to see Almeida the favourite in this one. But here we are, right? Here we are. So before we get into considering about how these two match up from a stylistic point of view and the fighter comparison and all that kind of stuff, it is also worth noting that Jailton Almeida is stepping up to take this fight on short notice. He's coming in on just a few weeks' notice. So even though he does have very good cardio, he's always in good shape. Obviously, coming in on short notice isn't ideal for anyone. And that does start to add to the reasons why I like Kuniev so much in this matchup. So if we take a look at the fighter comparison, we can see that both guys are about the same age. We can see that they're both about the same size roughly. Jailton Almeida, slightly longer reach, slightly longer leg reach, but his striking is absolutely shocking. And he doesn't know how to use that reach, so I don't think it's going to matter. Now, in terms of the stats aren't too meaningful on this one, because if we take a look at Kuniev's record, we can see that he's only had 2 fights which would generate stats. So actually 3 fights. He had this fight back in 2021. So he's only had 3 fights to add to the stats on this matchup. And so we don't have really good quality statistical data for Kuniev, but we can take a little look at Jailton Almeida. You know, obviously he's probably not going to land 70% more strikes than Almeida. You never know, maybe he does. But yeah, the striking stats not too useful. I mean, what is kind of useful is that Kuniev has 90% takedown defense, considering he fought Curtis Blades, and considering, you know, Jailton Almeida will want to get this fight to the ground. That stat is a pretty big deal. You can see Almeida shoots on average, you know, 6.5 takedowns per fight. So the fact that Kuniev does have 90% takedown defense against someone like Curtis Blades is pretty damn good. And you can see the vast majority of strikes that Jailton Almeida throws is to the head. So why do I think Kuniev is a very good bet in this fight? Well, George St. Pierre famously said that fighting is 90% mental. And we talk about how important game planning, strategy, fight IQ is in every video that we do, right? Every week when we do these breakdown videos, we talk about game planning, fight IQ, strategy, mentality. But there's an aspect of mentality that we don't talk about very often because it doesn't affect many fighters, so we don't have to bring it up very often. But there are some fighters that just don't have... I'm trying to think of how I word this in a way that doesn't sound really horrible, but there are just some fighters that are not psychologically built to be fighters. And I know that sounds really mean, but you get them every once in a while, and they may be crazy talented, or they could be crazy athletic, but they just don't have that same will to win, that same killer instinct, you know, that same kind of drive that other fighters have. And I've been betting on this sport for 15 years. I've made a profit betting on the UFC every single year for the last 15 years. And over a long period of time, when you've been doing things as long as I have, you just spot certain behaviors in fighters where you can tell they just don't actually want to be in there. And to some extent, I don't know how a lot of fighters like this end up becoming fighters, because you can see they just don't enjoy it. They're not comfortable in there. And so there's a huge difference between fighters that have bad fight IQ, they can't stick to game plans, they're not very tactical, compared to fighters like Almeida that just look physically uncomfortable and unhappy in the octagon. And so what we're going to do, we're going to show you footage of Almeida's last fight against Alexander Volkov, so you can kind of see firsthand these tendencies, these behaviors, these red flags that he has. And generally speaking, when you have a guy like Jailton Almeida fighting a tough, well-rounded fighter like Kuniev, they're going to lose a really big percentage of the time. Like, if you look at Jailton Almeida's record, a lot of the guys that he's beaten have had major flaws where his... it's going to sound horrible, but where his weak mentality hasn't really made a difference, right? If you look at, like, going right back to when he first came into the UFC, so, you know, Danilo Marquez, very low-level fighter, Parker Porter, one-dimensional striker, Anton Takali, one-dimensional striker, Shamil Abdurakhimov is about 150 years old, Jazier Rosenstrike, one-dimensional striker, no takedown offense, no ground game, Derek Lewis, no takedown offense, no ground game, and even then he survived 25 minutes in Brazil with Jailton Almeida. It was finished by Curtis Blades. Alexander Romanov, we know he has, you know, terrible cardio, and Sergey Spivak. A lot of people are quite high on Spivak. I think Spivak also has some of those kind of mentality issues as well. But the Spivak fight was ugly, and we'll show a little bit of footage of that to further back up that there are a lot of issues with Jailton Almeida that signal if you drag him into a war, if you drag him into a dogfight, he's going to struggle. And then the Alexander Volkov fight was red flag city. So for me, we are going to focus on how these two match up stylistically for sure. But the biggest reason for taking Kunev in this matchup is because I think Jailton Almeida is a mental midget that doesn't have the mentality to be a fighter at the top level. And I think whenever he faces someone that won't just roll over and play dead and give up a weak, cheap, easy submission early, I think he's going to struggle. So what we are going to do first of all is bring up the Sergey Spivak fight. It's not as damning as the Volkov one, but there are a few red flags in there. And once you see the red flags, you will appreciate that Kunev's probably not a bad bet. For me, personally, I would bet on basically any able-bodied heavyweight with good cardio at Jailton Almeida based on what we've seen in his last two fights. So here we go. So very early on, you can see that Almeida gives up a very, very cheap takedown, judo throw on the bottom. And one thing that stands out to me very clearly here is how weak Jailton Almeida looks on the bottom. He looks very, very weak off his back. Obviously, from top position, he's a demon. Very aggressive, very strong from top position, very heavy top game. But on his back, very, very weak. Kind of just ties Spivak up from guard. And at this point, he's been on the ground for a full minute. Doesn't really make much of an effort to get back up to his feet. And what's concerning about this position is that he's really close to the cage. Even when he's taken down here, you can see he's pretty close to the cage. Yet he doesn't really make much of an effort to get over to the cage and wall walk back up to his feet. He starts to show submissive body language, submissive tendencies, where he just accepts being on the bottom. Even here, when he's almost got his back square to the cage, and when Spivak is posturing up and giving him tons of space that he could use to get his back tight to the cage and look to wall walk back up to his feet, instead of trying to wall walk back up to his feet, he just continues to allow Spivak to chip away at him. And even there, in this sequence, watching slow-mo here, even there when he kind of pushes off the body of Spivak with his knee to create a little bit of space, that's his opportunity to explode back up to his feet. But instead, watch what he does with his arms. He reaches up, he grabs a hold of Spivak, and he pulls Spivak back on top of him. Look at this. Pulls Spivak back on top of him. You know? Very strange, very submissive body language, very submissive behavior. Jailton Almeida's not a guy actively trying to get back up to his feet here or work out of this position. He's looking for safety. He wants to keep Spivak nice and tight to him so that he can protect himself from taking damage, when what he should be thinking about is, how do I get back up to my feet? So you can see then, hits a reversal on Spivak, grabs the ankle, cheeky little ankle pick here. What's the left arm? There it is. But Spivak's just dreadful on the ground, so he's going to fall for shit like that. Won't be as easy with Kuniev. So, gets the back control. I mean, very loosey-goosey back control for a start. I'm going to be really critical of Jailton Almeida's ground game. He made tons of mistakes in the Derek Lewis fight. But loosey-goosey back control. Look how much space there is in here for Spivak to move around. Very loosey-goosey back control. Should be looking at going to the body triangle. Completely opens his guard up here, which is obviously an invite when you do this for your opponent to explode and pivot into top position. And even though Spivak hesitates and Almeida gets an opportunity to correct and tighten those hooks up or go to the body triangle, he still leaves very loosey-goosey hooks in here. And so inevitably, you know, it's only a matter of time. I mean, look how much space is in there. It is only a matter of time before even someone as bad on the ground as Spivak realises the opportunity you're gifting him and explodes into top position. And after an eternity, Spivak finally realises what he should be doing and just turns into Jailton Almeida. Absolutely dreadful, low-level shit. Dreadful. Both guys fucking dreadful. Not only is Jailton Almeida dreadful on the ground, but Spivak's dreadful on the ground for not pivoting into top position sooner. So again, Almeida just goes to close guard, fucks around off his back, eventually pops back up to his feet with a butterfly guard, elevates Spivak, all good, knocks Spivak out, gets the win. Everyone's happy. Everyone loves Jailton Almeida because he looks like a Brazilian superhero. Both these guys are fucking dreadful. Very, very bad. Very bad. Dreadful, 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 dreadful. Jailton gets the win. Does all the posturing. I'm amazing. Look at me. Fucking shit. Absolutely dreadful. So many mistakes. Got away with it. Fucking dreadful. But he didn't get away with it in his next fight. Because like we always say, the only place you find truth and honesty in this game is in the fight footage. And eventually, when you make mistakes like that, they're going to catch up with you. And you're going to be made to pay. And I want to say a big shout out to 4 people. Big shout out to 4 people in this fight. First of all, I want to say a big shout out to Alexander Volkov, because he came through for his big time when we live bet him in this fight. I also want to say a big shout out to the 3 judges scoring this fight, or the 2 judges that scored the fight for Alexander Volkov. It was a split decision. I want to say a big shout out to those judges because they scored this fight correctly. They scored this fight correctly. It all came down to the 3rd round, and in the 3rd round, Volkov spent most of the round on his back, and we know 9 times out of 10 the judges completely ignore the scoring criteria and they score the round in favour of the fighter who's in top position. But the scoring criteria states the guard is supposed to be a 50-50 position, and offense in guard, whether you're on the top or the bottom, determines who wins that position. So Almeida just laid on top of Volkov in round 3, which we're going to see, hugging him like a little baby, doing absolutely fucking nothing. 9 times out of 10, the judges would score a round like that incorrectly. 2 of the 3 judges scoring this fight did a fantastic job of scoring it correctly and scoring the round in favour of Volkov for strikes off his back. We won a very nice underdog live bet on Mr. Volkov. He came through for us big. If you're not in my live betting group, what the fuck are you doing with your life? What's going on? What better of an opportunity do you need? We make a profit almost every month of the year, and you can make money betting fights like this one and all the amazing fights we've got this weekend if you join the live betting group. If you're not in the live betting group, let me know why below if you're watching on YouTube, because it makes absolutely no sense to me. So this fight has got loads of red flags, absolutely tons and tons and tons of red flags with Jailton Almeida. It starts good, nice deep single leg takedown entry attempt here, and he snaps Volkov down, which is very, very nice. It's all good. So if we just skip through, Jailton's got good top control. You know, if he gets on top of you, yeah, he can hold you down. But he doesn't have that killer instinct. Doesn't do a lot of damage from top position. He's very passive. And so we know Volkov is super weak off his back. So he just chips away at Volkov from top position. But then Volkov is able to kind of grab a hold of him with a body lock from the bottom, which is very weird. You can see here, Jailton in top position, gets the body lock and just kind of rolls Jailton onto his back. Right? And you can see Jailton kind of like looking totally clueless here, staring over at his corner like, what do I do now? So Volkov rolls him onto his back. And now Jailton's not in a bad position here. Right? Volkov's not on top of him. He's sat up. He's got space. Volkov hasn't flattened him out. He's really close to the cage. So like we were talking about in the Sergey Spivak fight when he was on the bottom at the beginning of the first round. He's taken down very close to the cage. There's tons of space in there. What Jailton should be doing is kicking off on the legs, the hips, the body, the thighs of Volkov, exploding backward to get his back tight up against the cage, and then using the cage to wall walk back up to his feet. What does he do? Same shit he did against Spivak. He hugs Volkov like a little baby, just hugging him. I'm just going to stay here. Let's just sit here and cuddle for a moment. I mean, look at this. What is he doing? This is where he should be here. He should be moving back. He should be pushing off on Volkov, but he just sits there. And there's 2 minutes left to go in the round at this point, and he just sits there. And even worse, in this position, the only thing you should be thinking about, because you're in a losing position here, is creating space between you and your opponent, disengaging and getting the fuck away so you can get back up to your feet. That's the only thing Almeida should be thinking about. But remember when we played the Sergey Spivak fight and Sergey was posturing up and throwing that ground and pound up against the cage, and we said, look, we slowed the footage right down. We said, look, Jailton reached up and pulled Spivak back on top of him. So he did the opposite of what he should have done. Should have been trying to push away, disengage, create space, get back up. He did the opposite. He does the same here. Watch. Check out his left arm. Grabs a hold, trying to grab a hold of Volkov and bring him back in. He wants him in guard. But this is not a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament. It's a cage fight to the death. Starts rolling for a leg. But like Joe Silva famously said, you can't win a fight with your head between a dude's legs. And Almeida's finding out the hard way. And he's just eating these elbows. And in all of this, he's moved himself into a worse position. So, in the start of this sequence, he wasn't too far away from the cage. He was in a much stronger position to scramble over the cage and wall walk back up to his feet than he is now. I mean, what's he doing? He's been on the ground for about a minute at this point, with his head in between Volkov's legs, doing God knows what. I tell you what he is doing. He's doing the opposite of what he should be doing. So he's been on in this position for like a minute now. Now gets to his knees, starts to stand back up. But Volkov just overpowers him. Look at this. What is he doing? Just hanging onto this leg. What is he doing? What is he doing? And eventually, he just spends the whole round fucking around on his back. And this is where you start to see he made a lot of mistakes in that first round against Sergey Spivak. He got away with it. He didn't get away with it against Volkov, and I don't think he's going to get away with it against Kunev if he fights like this either. So in the round 2 now, obviously Volkov has got terrible takedown defense, so no surprise to see Almeida take him down here. Volkov just falls over. Very nice inside trip, actually. Let's be fair, very nice inside trip. And we know Volkov is very weak off his back, so Almeida's able to rack up a bunch of top control from this position. We know Almeida's very strong, very heavy from top position, and just kind of overwhelms Volkov on the ground. But again, Guest stood up because he doesn't do a lot from top position. I'm not going to play the whole thing, so I'll make this breakdown super long. But he just lies like this. Like, see how he's just kind of like lying there, not throwing any strikes, not trying to advance position? This is all Almeida does. I'm not going to play the whole sequence. The video will be too long. You can go watch it yourself. But look at this shit. Referee stands him up because he's like, you're not doing nothing. Jailton takes him back down. Not hard. Volkov's takedown offense is dreadful. But again, just kind of wet blankets him from top position. Treating it like a BJJ tournament. Anyway, into round 3. Into round 3. So more of the same, really. More of the same. Takes Volkov down, which is very nice. Turns a corner, flattens him out. 3 minutes 40 left to go in the round. And this I'm not going to play the whole thing. I know I keep saying that. I don't want to make the breakdown super long. But he just basically lies here for the rest of the round while Volkov punches him in the head. Like, I'll just skip through. He just kind of lays on top of Volkov, doing absolutely nothing. And look, Jailton has got a heavy top game. Good grappling control. There's no doubt about it. But I think when this guy goes up against someone that can neutralize the threat of his grappling and forces him to stand and strike, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. So now let's bring up a little bit of footage on Mr. Kunev. And my basic logic with betting Kunev at underdog odds this weekend is that he's a tough Russian with decent cardio who's difficult to hold down. And I think those 3 things are more than enough to cause Jailton Almeida problems. Tough, good cardio, hard to hold down. I think those 3 attributes in 2026 will give Jailton Almeida absolute hell. So I'm going to show you those 3 attributes in this fight. And then hopefully the bet on Kunev will make a bit of sense for you. So, Curtis Blades, probably the best offensive wrestler in the heavyweight division in my opinion. Drives through on a very nice double leg takedown. And then Kunev does exactly what you should supposed to do, which is the opposite of what Jailton Almeida did in the last 2 fights I showed you. As soon as he gets taken down, immediately shows urgency to free his legs from underneath Blades, scramble back up to his feet. So legs underneath Blades, gets his back tight to the cage, gets his right side tight to the cage, uses the cage to wall walk back up to his feet against the best wrestler in the division. Not bad for your UFC debut. So we'll just skip through here so you can see his defensive wrestling. Blades trying to drag him to the ground. And you can see Kunev doing a really good job of staying upright. Starts to work to break the grip of Blades. Gets dragged down. But again, does the opposite of what Jailton Almeida did in the last 2 fights that I showed you. Kunev does the right thing. Starts to scramble over to the cage. Gets his right side tight to the cage to protect his back. And if we just skip through a few seconds, stands back up. This is exactly what you are supposed to do. Keeps trying to turn into Blades, keep trying to break his grip. Until eventually Blades is like, okay, I can't keep this guy down back in the middle of the octagon. Now, one really important thing to pay attention to in this fight is how much energy Kunev is being forced to exert. Because Blades is making him work really hard here. Remember, this is his UFC debut. He's a big boy. I mean, look at this. I mean, I can't say nothing. Mine's probably bigger than that. But he's got a big old belly. He's a big old boy. He's a big Russian. And he's being forced to sprint here in his UFC debut against one of the best heavyweights in the world. Pay attention to that, because when I show you how he looks in round 3, you're going to see his cardio holds up pretty damn good, which is important because we've seen in the 3rd round of that Volkov fight, even though Jailton makes a lot of mistakes in grappling positions, he still is going to commit hard and drive in hard on those takedown attempts in the 3rd round, right? So anyway, we skip through into round 2. Good stuff, though, from Kunev, right? I always say it's not a big deal if your takedown offense isn't great, as long as you can quickly work your way back up to your feet. And Kunev definitely ticks that box. So we keep him moving. Another takedown attempt here from Blades. This time, Kunev does a good job of reading the initial entry and clearing his legs and getting his back over to the cage. Does a real good job preventing Blades from gaining control of his body. All good stuff there. So he's just active, aggressive on the feet, you know, aggressive with the combinations, aggressive with his boxing, far better boxer than Jailton Almeida in my opinion. And we keep skipping through. Cheeky little right hand here coming up. Bam, we love it. He's just decent. He's just decent. Decent little boxer. Decent big boxer. Big old Russian. We like it. So anyway, beautifully timed deep double leg entry there from Blades. But now Kunev has kind of settled into a rhythm. Do you know what I mean? He's got his legs underneath him. He does a good job of stuffing that takedown. Another takedown attempt here from Blades. Drives in on a single leg. Great balance for Kunev. Superb athleticism. Superb balance for such a big guy. Against, I will say it again, probably the best wrestler in the division. Pure wrestler, Curtis Blades. Look at this from Kunev. It's a masterclass. Look at this boxing. I think he kills Jailton Almeida this week, guys. I think he wins this fight comfortably. I think he smokes Jailton Almeida. I'm going to come out and just say it right now. I think he smokes him. Bad. Real bad. So anyway. Into this 3rd round. And remember, this fight has been contested at a crazy pace. Forced to, you know, exert loads of energy to defend the takedowns in round 1, and it's been aggressive on the feet in that 2nd round. And again, look at the damage on their faces, right? Look at Kunev's face. I've got 2 Shiba Inus. You could maybe see one. No, you can't quite see him. Can you see him? There's one there. I've got 2 Shiba Inus. I take more damage taking my dogs for a walk than Kunev has taken in 10 minutes against one of the best heavyweights in the world. But take a look at the damage that Curtis Blades has got on his face. He looks like he's driven into a tree. Not good. Not good. Kunev looks fantastic here. So we'll keep it going. So we just obviously want to focus on the grappling. Nice deep double leg takedown attempt from Mr. Blades. But Kunev reads it. Backs up. Gets his back up tight against the cage. So that when Blades shoots in, he's already up against the cage and in a good position to either use the cage to defend the takedown or pop back up to his feet if he does get taken down. This is a nice deep entry from Blades, but you can see Mr. Kunev has got this underhook he fights for on the left side, which makes life very, very hard for Mr. Blades. Then he starts digging for the underhook on the right side. This is picture perfect technique. Picture perfect technique. You can see Blades has got his hands connected around the legs of Kunev, but Kunev fights with those underhooks. Does a great job of using the cage to stay upright. Starts to break the grip. And it is an utter masterclass in takedown defense. Because despite some very, very effective chain wrestling from Curtis Blades, he doesn't get Mr. Kunev down. I mean, look at this. Look at this. Picture perfect. Look how he pivots into Blades from this position. But as he pivots, he's already got underhooks. Look at this. It's a thing of beauty. It's a thing of beauty. Look at this. Watch. Oh, that's some high level shit. That is some high level shit. It's the opposite of the retardation that you see when you watch Sergey Spivak and Jailton Almeida fight. This guy is very good. He's very good. I'm warning you right now, he's very good. He might not beat Jailton Almeida this weekend, right? Anything can happen in MMA. Who knows what's going to happen this weekend in that fight. But I will say this. If you can do this in your UFC debut against one of the best heavyweights in the world in Curtis Blades, you've got a bright future. Let's check out the comparison tool. He's only 33 years old, which is young for a heavyweight. He's going to be very good, guys. He's going to be very good. And look how his cardio holds up in this fast-paced fight. Look at this short little elbow. coming up on the inside. Boom. I'm telling you right now, he does this. Look at the damage Blades is wearing. If he does this damage to Jailton Almeida, telling you right now, telling you this for free, Jailton won't go the distance with Kuniev, right? What more can I say? I think Kuniev, like I say, we've had a lot of very, very good underdog bets this year already. I hope you've made good money following my bets this year already. You should have. And you can make way better money in my live betting group, because look at this. Look at this. We make a profit almost every week. What more do you want? What more do you want? Join the live betting group where you can literally turn water into wine. What more do you want? We've had all these underdog winners. Offley, Nakamura, right? Gaethje, Micallef, and, you know, even money odds. But out of all those bets that have done very well in the last few weeks, look at how well Gaethje did against Paddy Pimblett, right? Tiny boys, Kunev is the one. These odds are wide. They're way off. I'll be very surprised if Almeida wins this weekend. The footage doesn't lie, right? And the only way this bet loses is if something mad happens, like Kunev gets caught in a really bad position that you can't fight out of, or flash KO'd, or he comes in sick or injured or something like that. But if both these guys fight like they have in their last few matchups, Kunev will fucking smoke Jailton Almeida. The footage doesn't lie. It is there for the whole universe to see. And the UFC betting market has capped this fight dead wrong. Dead wrong. If I were capping this fight, I'd have Kuniev at like a 1.40 minus 250 favourite. Because Almeida, even if, you know, Almeida better bring his fucking packed lunch this weekend, because he will need it. He's got a tough fight, and it's on short notice. And we've seen how good Kuniev looked against, in my opinion, a better MMA grappler than Jailton Almeida. I believe Curtis Blades is a better MMA grappler. You know why? Because he doesn't lie on his back trying to cuddle his opponents for 10 minutes like fucking Almeida does. So Kuniev is the one this weekend. I love it. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think, but I love it. Now let's break down the fight between Amir Albazi and Ryoji Horiguchi. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds, we can see the Horiguchi is a big favourite. Average odds are about 1.27, which is going to be minus 364 for an implied probability of 78%. If we take a look at the odds on Albazi, he's a 3.78 underdog, which is plus 278 for an implied probability of 27%. So again, even though I think Horiguchi is very likely to win this weekend, to get any value on him at all, you'd have to cap him at almost 85%, which makes him impossible to bet. So this breakdown is going to focus more on whether Albazi is worth a bet or not. So we bring up the fighter comparison tool. We can see that both guys are about the same age, but Horiguchi is getting pretty old for a flyweight. We know that the lighter weight classes, you know, the fighters tend to decline earlier in their careers. So 35 years old is really old actually for a flyweight, especially when you've had 40 pro fights like Horiguchi has. So he does have a lot of miles on the clock. Granted, a lot of those miles were against a much lower level of opponent. He was in the UFC for a bit, and he went to Bellator, then he was kicking about in Rising, now he's back in the UFC. So for a big chunk of his career, he did face a low level of opponent where he wouldn't have put as many miles on the clock as if he would have stayed in the UFC. But 40 fights, 40 training camps, 40 weight cuts is still a lot of wear and tear on the body. Both of them are about the same size, nothing too major going on there. Now in terms of the stats, we can see Horiguchi lands 30% more strikes per minute. He's slightly more accurate. The striking accuracy of Albazi, 34%, is tragic. That might be one of the lowest striking accuracy percentages I've ever seen. Horiguchi, slightly better defensively. And we can see that Horiguchi is more likely to attempt takedowns, slightly better takedown offense, although 50%, 55% tragic, respectively. And you can see the strike distribution charts, both of them heavily favour head strikes. So, in terms of how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, based on Horiguchi's last fight against Tagir Ulanbekov, he's basically better than Albazi everywhere. He's like 20 to 30% better than him everywhere. Lands a much higher volume of strikes per round. We take a look at the stats. 32% more strikes per minute, more accurate. This is going to be one of those fights where if Ulanbekov wasn't able to take Horiguchi down and hold him down, Albazi's not going to be able to either, and Horiguchi is clearly the better striker. On top of that, Albazi's a volume striker that doesn't really have power in his hands. If you take a look at his record, you can see he's an absolute decisionator with his last four. Grappling matches. But his last two fights have gone to decisions. This one almost went to a decision. And so, yeah, volume striker, chance for flash KO isn't very high. Don't want to waste your time on this one. Horiguchi should win easily. I think he keeps the majority of the fight standing. Outstrikes Albazi by a decent margin. Wins very clear. Wins very comfortably. He was very aggressive. Showed that killer instinct against Ulanbekov. If he comes in and fights the same, Albazi is in a lot of trouble. Having said that, from a betting point of view, the odds are too steep on Horiguchi. We can't bet him. So if you really want to bet this fight, you have to take Albazi, but it's not a bet that I would place personally. So I hope that was useful for you. Now let's move on to the main event. Now I'm going to explain the reasons why I think Vinicius Oliveira to beat Mario Bautista is a very good bet this weekend. And I'm also going to use this fight as an opportunity to let you guys know about a very useful feature that I've added to the website just this week. So currently, the only way to find out what new stuff has been added to the website, what updates we've had since you last visited, is by going to the homepage or to the activity feed on your user profiles and scrolling down to the activity feed. You can see it here on the homepage, the what's happening right now section, and you can see that throughout the day different updates appear here depending on all the stuff that's going on the website. So like if we go to reactions, you can see Tyler, Paul, Widley, they've reacted to certain things. If we go to the discussion tab, you can see people talking about notifying you of posts on the forum, things like that, who've submitted their predictions. Jem has been active submitting his predictions recently, bets, all that kind of stuff. And you can also see, if we scroll down to the bottom, notifications appear in the activity feed when new breakdown videos or bets are added to the site. You can see here also I've added a football bet, the football betting section. But what this means is that you do have to come to the website in order to find out what new stuff has been added since your last visit. What I've now done is added a notification system where you can kind of tailor what notifications you want to receive, so that you don't end up receiving like loads of different emails and stuff for things you might not be that interested in. For example, next week I'm doing a crypto and stocks live stream, which is scheduled in. You might not be interested in crypto and stocks, so you might not want to receive notification emails about this. But if you want to receive notification emails anytime new breakdown videos or new bets are added to the website, all you now need to do is go to your user profile. So you just roll your mouse over view profile. Obviously on mobile, it'll be from the mobile menu. And once your profile loads, you can see that you have this new message system here. You can see I've had some messages. There are all kinds of messages already set up for you to receive, like when someone responds to your forum post or tags you in the chat room or reacts to one of your messages either on the chat room or forum or anywhere else throughout the website. But by default, you won't receive email notifications for any of that, because I don't want you to get loads of spam, loads of emails that you might not be that interested in. But what you can do now, if you come to this messages section on your profile, hit the three dots, click notification settings, you bring up these notification settings where you can basically choose how you want to be notified of different things. So you've got all these different options here, and you can choose to receive notifications via in-app, via push alerts, or via email. So if you want to just receive notifications or push alerts to the app when new bets, new breakdown videos are added to the site, you could just deselect all of these, but just keep announcements on email or on push notifications, and then you'll receive a push notification if you've downloaded the app, or obviously email notifications if you've selected that setting. And there you can see there's the mobile app. Right, camera's gone crazy. There's the mobile app right there, right? Boom, 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 boom. It's not focusing too good. But there's the mobile app. So you get push alerts there if you keep this one selected. Emails there. You can figure out what type of stuff you want notifications for. And anytime I add a new bet or a breakdown video to the site, it'll come as an announcement. So you don't miss out on anything. So I just thought this fight is a real good example to let you guys know about this cool new feature that I have only just added in the last few days. So we'll go back to the research tool now to explain the reasons why I think Oliveira is a good bet against Mario Bautista. So we will start with the odds, because the odds play a big part of the reasoning why I am betting Vinicius Oliveira this weekend. So Bautista is currently a 1.66 favourite, which is minus 152 for an implied probability of 60%. Now I'm not actually going to use these odds because we bet Oliveira a few days ago and his odds have now declined. And his current odds carry an implied probability of about 45%. It's not a massive difference compared to the odds that we bet him at, but I don't love Oliveira as much at these odds. So we bet him a few days ago at odds of, where is he? 2.40 plus 140. So if we bring up the calculators and we can look at the implied probability on those odds, which is going to bring the calculators up, another really useful feature on the website. So we'll put in 2.40, calculate implied probability, and we can see that odds of 2.40 is plus 140 for an implied probability of about 42%. Now, what I will say is this. There's not a massive difference between the odds of 2.24 and 2.40, right? Not a massive difference to the naked eye. It's not something your average sports bettor is really going to care about or pay that much attention to. But when you look at the difference in the odds, so if we get the calculator up and we look at the implied probability on Oliveira's current odds, which is 44.6, and we take that away from the odds that we bet him at, which is 41.67, that's a difference of 2.93%. Now, if you were to generate an ROI over the long term of 2.93% on any high liquidity sport over a big sample size, that's a pretty good return on investment. That's a pretty good figure. So even though to the naked eye there's not a massive difference between 2.40 and 2.24, by now taking Oliveira at odds of 2.24, you are giving up almost a 3% margin, which over the long term, over hundreds or over thousands of bets, that can be the difference between a profitable bet and a break-even bet, or a profitable bet and even a losing bet, right? Because a 2.93 ROI, it's quite respectable over a very long period of time. So I don't love Oliveira as much at these odds if you haven't bet him already, simply because I view this fight as being very close to 50-50. I think it could go either way. I don't think Oliveira is more likely to win. I just think at odds of 2.40, there's a really good margin of value in Oliveira's odds, because, you know, if we're capping this fight at 50-50 and his odds carry an implied or his odds of 2.40 carry an implied probability of 41.67, that's a nice 8% margin over the bookies, which is brilliant. It means it doesn't really matter if Oliveira loses. If you're getting that kind of value, you know, on bets in this odds range over the long term, you're going to make a really good return, right? 8.33 is a very, very, very attractive margin of value in the odds. The problem we've got is if we work off these odds, which is an implied probability of 44.6, it's still a decent margin. 5% is still great, but it's not 8%. 8% is a huge margin. It's very rare you'll find that in any kind of pre-fight betting on any sport. Very, very big margin. And so the odds have moved. I still think, you know, there's a little bit of value still in Oliveira, but I don't like it as much as I did. I think this is a 50-50 fight. So straight off the bat, I'm not coming out and I'm saying I think Oliveira is going to win. I just think from a pure value betting point of view, he's a very, very good value bet. Odds of 2.40 plus 140. That's all I'm saying. So do with that what you will. I'm going to explain the reasons why I think this is a 50-50 fight. Obviously, in this odds range, if you haven't bet Oliveira yet, it's tighter to the wire. It's not ideal, right? So anyway, let's get into the fighter comparison. So they're both about the same age. They're both about the same size. Nothing too major going on there. Let's take a look at these stats, because these stats are important. You can see Bautista lands around 25% more strikes per minute, which is a pretty big deal, because chances are at those numbers he's going to be outstriking Oliveira. He's also more accurate. We know Oliveira can be a bit wild and sloppy at times. He's also slightly better defensively. In terms of takedowns, they're quite aggressive with the takedown actually. Two takedowns on average per 15 minutes for two guys that are predominantly strikers. That's quite high. You can see Oliveira's got better takedown defense, although both of them are very difficult to take down and hold down. Bautista more aggressive with the submissions. What you can also see is both guys attack the body quite a lot. Oliveira goes to the legs a decent amount, but for the most part they're both headhunters. We got that out of the way. So why do I like Vinicius Oliveira in this fight, or why do I think this fight is 50-50? I think this fight is 50-50 because Bautista is a guy that does struggle to put his stamp on rounds, whereas Vinicius Oliveira is big action, violence and damage. So if you go back and watch Bautista's past fights, any of them really, over the last few years, he is a bit of a decisionator and they're all kind of close, right? Obviously the Nurmagomedov fight wasn't close, but the Patricky Mix fight, you know, Bautista did well in the first two rounds, and the third round Bautista was like under a bit of pressure, eating some big shots, didn't look so comfortable on the feet. Aldo fight was razor close. A lot of people scored it for Aldo. The Ricky Simone fight was close and competitive. The Damon Blackshear fight was competitive, right? This is a guy that gets involved in really competitive fights. But what you notice about all four of these fights is that none of those guys lack the ability to really punish Bautista in close matchups. So if you look at Bautista's, you know, any of these wins, yes, he's slightly outstriking his opponents. In certain sequences, you know, he's out grappling them or he's stifling them, in the case of Jose Aldo, where he's kind of just controlling him up against the cage. But if you go and watch any of these four fights, he's not really causing his opponents any major problems, in the sense that he's not really damaging them, he's not really hurting them, he's not really coming close to finishing them. He's outworking them and he's edging them, but it's kind of like fine margins. This is a reason why a lot of people were upset with the Jose Aldo decision, because you know, he attempted 10 takedowns, didn't get any. Attempted 3 takedowns against Simone, didn't get any. Attempted 10 takedowns against Blackshear, only got 2. So he's one of these guys that he outworks people, he out-hustles people, he does outstrike people. You know, he outworks them in grappling positions, but he doesn't really win rounds dominantly and beyond all reasonable doubt. He kind of just edges his opponents by outworking them. And his cardio's phenomenal, and he's reasonably technical everywhere, but he doesn't really damage his opponents or really put his stamp on rounds. Now, compare that to Vinicius Oliveira, who does have a lot of flaws. You know, he slows down as fights wear on, and, you know, his striking defense isn't the best, and he does have a tendency to get taken down. But he's also relentless, and he hurts you. He damages you. He forces you to fight at a crazy pace. And if you look at the difference in what he's done to his last three opponents, you know, all 3 of these fights have gone to a decision, compared to the decisions that Bautista's gone to, you know, he puts his opponents, Phillips, Nurmagomedov, Simone, under major pressure. They're constantly on the back foot. You know, they're drowning in his forward pressure and aggression. They're drowning in under his volume and the impactfulness of his shots. And so from my perspective, I think this is going to be a very close fight, because whilst Bautista will likely outwork Oliveira in terms of volume by like a marginal amount, we can see lands like 25% more strikes per minute, so he'll slightly edge Oliveira. He might get some takedowns. I think Bautista is really going to struggle to hold Oliveira down. You know, if Said Nurmagomedov and Ricky Simon fail to hold Oliveira down, I think Bautista will struggle. I think Nurmagomedov and Simon are better MMA grapplers than Bautista. And you can see from the numbers, Oliveira defended 9 of 11 takedowns against Ricky Simon. Defended them all against Said Nurmagomedov, right? So if Oliveira can keep the fight standing against guys like Nurmagomedov, Simon, I think he's going to be able to neutralise the threat of Bautista's grappling. And so on the feet, when you look at how they match up stylistically, Oliveira is likely to be the aggressor on the front foot, coming forward, putting a lot of pressure on his opponent. And he's likely going to be landing the harder, more damaging shots. So when you think about the dynamic in which this fight could take place, Bautista's probably going to be on the outside, getting walked down, looking to chip away at Oliveira with volume strikes, but it's almost certainly going to be Oliveira landing the harder, more damaging shots. And what I'd like to do is bring up Bautista's fight against Patricky Mix, so you can see the third round. So everyone spoke about how bad Patricky Mix looked in this fight, but I want to show you the third round. Here we go. Just want to zoom ahead. I hate how it auto plays the audio. It is so irritating. Right, let's go to the third round. So it had been a really slow start from Patricky Mix, and so he really didn't do a lot for the first 2 rounds. Took the first 2 rounds off. Do you know what I'm actually going to do? Let's do this the other way round. Let's show a bit of footage of Vinicius Oliveira first. Let's bring the Kyler Phillips fight up. So Phillips started really strong in this one and faded. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to round 2. And I just want you to see the kind of range in which Oliveira fights in. So Oliveira is always on the front foot. So he's coming forward, putting you on the back foot. Very hyper aggressive, right? Look at this. This is round 2. Very, very, very aggressive. So we'll skip forward a bit because obviously Phillips is in a lot of trouble here. But we just want to see the vibe that Oliveira gives off. So by this point, Phillips has recovered. But just look at Oliveira on the front foot. Very aggressive. Throwing big, wide, looping power shots. Inflicting damage. Hurting you. And he just walks you down. Puts it on you for 3 rounds. And we'll continue into round 3. So you can see he just keeps this up, right? Just walks you down. Gets taken down there, pops back up. Hyper, hyper, hyper aggressive. We're going to go into the third round, so you can see he kind of keeps this up. So in the third round now, and you can see he's just constantly coming forward, landing hard, damaging, impactful shots. He's got the forward pressure, he's got the aggression. Yes, he fights with his hands low. Yes, he's sloppy. Yes, he's reckless. But will Bautista have the power in his hands to punish Oliveira? For me, he's just a volume striker. Oliveira is always on the front foot, hyper aggressive, absolutely relentless, constantly coming forward, walking you down, right? So we'll just play this for another minute and then we'll move on to Bautista, so you can kind of see why I think Oliveira can cause him big trouble. And you can see, despite the fact that Oliveira's been fighting at a crazy pace in this one, he's not breathing heavy, doesn't look tired, he's still just walking Phillips down, generating loads of power on his shots. Big impactfulness in his punches, trying to cut the cage off. And yes, Phillips is outstriking Oliveira from the outside. He's got the volume, just like Bautista will likely have the volume from the outside. But it is so difficult to win rounds in the eyes of the judges when the rounds look like this and you're on the back foot and you can't back your opponent up, and when you land they don't back up an inch and they don't, you know, your shots don't do any damage. But when your opponent lands, it's meaningful, gets a reaction from the crowd, it damages them. And you can see he's just constantly on the front foot. Absolutely relentless. Absolutely relentless. So now I want to show you the third round of the Bautista Patchy mix fight. So Bautista's got amazing cardio. So where you see him struggle a little bit in this third round, it's not because he's getting tired. It's because Patricky Mix has got comfortable in there. He's settled into a rhythm and he has started to find his range. So what I want you to pay attention to here is how bad Patchy Mix's striking defense is, and the fact that Patchy Mix really doesn't move his head very much and he just stands right in front of Bautista. But how ineffective Bautista's striking is, in the sense that when he lands combinations and when he lands clean and hard, he doesn't hurt Patchy Mix or back him up at all. And yet when Patchy Mix comes forward and attacks Bautista, you can see Bautista really struggles with the forward pressure of Mix, and Mix starts to build momentum and put Bautista onto the back foot. So you'll see it once Bautista eases off on the volume a little bit and Mix starts to let his hands go. Hi, babe. You can see he's just kind of jabbing Mix to death. And I don't think this is going to work against Oliveira, because as you're trying to jab and leg kick Oliveira to death, he's going to be coming with big looping power shots, power hooks, really damaging shots. And you can see when Mix starts to let his hands go, hey Kiko, coming up. When Mix starts to let his hands go here, you can see he starts to land on Bautista, back him up and start to damage him. My dog is made an appearance when I go to pick her up. You coming up, babe? You coming up? Come on then. Say hello. Let's say hello. There she is. She's gonna break the end of this fight down. Who do you think's gonna win, Keeks? What do you think, babe? What do you think? Bautista? Mix? You're starting to see it, right? Bautista on the back foot, and his jabs and leg kicks aren't working anymore to back Mix up, because Mix just isn't respecting it. So as Mix is starting to walk Bautista down, he's having more success landing harder, damaging shots, which actually get Bautista's attention and score. What are you doing, babe? You bored? Okay, there we go. There we go. So, you can kind of see it in this third round. I probably need to zoom through and not make this breakdown super long, but you can just kind of visualize Bautista on the back foot, Vinicius Oliveira walking him down, throwing big looping hard power shots. I think that Oliveira can win rounds by landing the harder, more damaging shots, putting Bautista under a lot of pressure, and just making it very difficult for Bautista to win rounds. He doesn't have a judge-pleasing style. You know, circling away, bouncing away from your opponents like this, if you're eating the harder shots, it's going to be difficult to win rounds. So that's why I think this fight is 50-50. I don't love Oliveira at these odds as much. Obviously, if you remember in my community, we bet Oliveira a few days ago when the odds were better. They've declined a bit now. The major risk, I think, with Oliveira is that, you know, he does slow down a bit as fights wear on, whereas Bautista's a cardio machine. But at the same time, first 5-round fight, first main event, Oliveira is improving at a rapid rate. Even though it's a 5-rounder, which isn't ideal, I'd be all over Oliveira if it was 3 rounds. Even though it's a 5-rounder, which isn't ideal, it will be hard, in my opinion, for Bautista to win 3 out of the 5 rounds, and he has virtually no chance of finishing Oliveira, whereas Oliveira does have major power. So, hope you found that useful. If you did, please like the video, leave a comment below, check out my website, MMABettingTips.com, link in the description. Join my live betting group if you haven't. It's an IQ test, it's a no-brainer. You will absolutely love it. Give it a try. And until next time, I'll be dropping another breakdown very soon. Have a great week. Love you all. Take care. Bye.